Yes, Silent Hill 3. The game that's not only a direct sequel to the original, but also spawned the most disgusting, horrifying, absolutely disturbing. Nope. Silent Hill 3 ties both games into a gripping narrative, delivering a story that is both deeply personal and profoundly disturbing. You play as Heather Mason, a 17-year-old girl who thinks she's just another normal teenager. Her days are filled with running errands, dodging creeps, and trying to live a quiet life with her father. But Heather is far from normal. She's the key to a dark history that began years before she was even born, a legacy tied to a cult's obsession with bringing their god into the world. And now, she's about to discover that truth firsthand. It all began 17 years ago, when Heather wasn't really Heather. Let me explain. She was Cheryl Mason, the adopted daughter of Harry Mason, a father who wanted to take his little girl on a vacation, but took a turn for the worse. Cheryl went missing, and the next thing you know, Harry was about to face a town full of monsters.
They look like monsters to you?
Yes, Vincent. Monsters.
Don't worry. It's just a joke.
Sure. This led Harry down a determined path to find Cheryl, battling monsters with a rusty pipe and his devastating line,
What's that? What's this?
It turns out Cheryl wasn't fully Cheryl. She was part of, oh boy, here we go, Alessa Gillespie, the daughter of Dahlia Gillespie, the town's cult leader who used Alessa to summon their god. Harry puts a stop to it, defeating their god, and escaped the town with a newborn baby. That baby was Heather. This is where the game picks up, with Harry raising Heather far away from the town, protecting her from the cult's reach and the truth of her origins. But sometimes the past is too much to hide, and Heather is forced to face some of the most disturbing figures in the series. Let's take a closer look at these figures and discover what truly makes them a monster. You've walked countless halls and areas of the mall. No signs of life can be heard. It almost feels like you're alone until... a gun, conveniently placed on the floor. This is when you're met with the Closer, a towering amalgamation of flesh that serves as your wake-up call. This thing is huge and sluggish. Its massive arms are like punching bags, stitched together in ways that doesn't make sense. And its mouth, if you could even call it that, is constantly twitching, making this disgusting wet sound you can almost feel. Each step is accompanied by the sound of flesh tearing and twitching limbs. There's something about it, how it moves, how it sounds, what it represents. The Closer isn't just scary because of how it looks. Sure, its design is horrifying, those giant bags of arms, the twitching lips, the sheer size of it, but it's much more than that. It feels like a wall, like it traps you to make you feel small. Its name hints at what it does. It closes you in. The Closers are designed to obstruct Heather's path. Their gigantic size makes it difficult to maneuver around. In combat, their massive arms can sweep in wide arcs or thrust forward suddenly. After Brookhaven Hospital, their attacks become even more deadlier. In addition to its sweeping attacks, the Closer wields a sharp, protruding bone that extends at the end of one arm. The stabbing motion feels invasive, emphasizing a personal and visceral threat compared to the broader, crushing swipes of its other attacks. It's a physical manifestation of Alessa's fears and struggles, of everything that weighed her down. Its massive bag-like arms feel like barriers, like obstacles that you're forced to push through. It's not just trying to hurt you, it's trying to stop you from moving forward. This monster may have been foreshadowed in the original Silent Hill through a child's drawing found in Alessa's bedroom. The drawing depicts a tall, humanoid figure with large, block-like arms, bearing a striking resemblance to the Closer. This could suggest that the Closer existed as part of Alessa's nightmares or imagination even before her reincarnation as Heather. This connection highlights how deeply rooted Alessa's trauma is, manifesting not only in her subconscious but also in the physical monsters that populate the Silent Hill universe. The first encounter in the clothing store is a memorable introduction, signaling the game's intent to keep players constantly on edge. Whether viewed as a gameplay obstacle or a symbolic representation of Heather's inner turmoil, the Closer remains one of the franchise's most unforgettable monsters. The Doublehead are dog-like monsters that are encountered early in the game. Its head, much like its name, is split down the middle, with its tongue hanging limp between the two halves, as though it was torn apart and left to keep living against its will. Its body is wrapped in flesh-like bandages, burned and raw, the epitome of suffering. Their eyes tells two stories, one red and sharp, the other cloudy and gaunt. Together, they give a sense of something that sees everything and nothing, existing in two minds. When it howls, the sound feels heavy, more than just noise. It carries something raw and primal, calling out to more of its kind. During the initial encounter, Heather is equipped with nothing more than a knife or handgun, making it a frantic introduction to the game's combat. The Doubleheads are quick and aggressive, lunging at Heather or gnawing at her legs. These monsters aren't just here to attack. They're here to overwhelm, to corner, and to make you feel hunted. Its split jaw takes inspiration from the mythological creature of Cerberus, the multi-headed watchdog of the underworld. Its design intentionally gave it this hellish appearance to emphasize that Heather has entered a darker and more terrifying reality. The Doublehead is a manifestation of Heather's trauma, born from Alessa's hatred and fear of dogs. It's a twisted echo of the Groaners and the Split Head from the original Silent Hill, monsters that also stemmed from Alessa's nightmares. The burns, the bandages, the split head, it's all connected to something deeper, something tied to Heather's past. Not the normal life she lived, but the other half, Alessa's. Alessa's pain after being burned and the ritual that tried to force the cult's god into existence didn't just go away, it lingered, becoming things that torment Heather. The burns are too familiar, the bandages too The double head isn't an accident. It's a design that speaks to more than just suffering. It speaks to being torn apart, divided, just like Heather's identity, and just like Alessa's life. Their dog-like appearance goes deeper. Alessa hated dogs, feared them after being attacked as a child. That fear never left. It grew. When the doubleheads feed, it feels desperate, almost tragic. There's a sadness to it. Watching them devour something is horrifying, but it also feels like you're seeing something helpless, trapped in its own hunger, its own torment, its own suffering. The doubleheads were placed at the start of the game for a reason, a statement. Silent Hill isn't a place of simple horrors. It's a world of pain, of memories, and fears that don't let go. The doubleheads, with their split jaws and bandaged bodies, are guardians of that world, dragging Heather deeper into it, forcing her to face what she doesn't want to see. They are part of the weight pressing down on her, part of the nightmare she has no choice but to keep going through. What they mean, what they are, is suffering, both inflicted and endured. The Numb Bodies are some of the game's most strangest little guys. They aren't the strongest or the smartest, but their presence carries a sense of guilt that sticks to you. These things look like they don't even belong in their own skin, with pale, cracked bodies and awkward movements that seem off. The way they attack is simple, but it's not the attacks themselves that are the problem, rather how they act before and after. Sometimes they ignore you entirely, wandering aimlessly. Other times they rush in with a creepy kind of desperation, like children running for grandma's cookies. During your fight against them, the Numb Bodies react in ways that make the situation even more horrific. They shriek when hurt, making high-pitched, childlike cries that sound more like fear than pain. It's disturbing because it's pathetic. Killing them feels less like dealing with a threat and more like putting something down. The larger versions are even worse. They're bulky, hit harder, and take more effort to bring down, but there isn't much backstory to the Numb Bodies. They're not tied to Heather in any clear way. Their name, Numb Body, reflects their sluggish, clumsy movements and lifeless appearance. It's speculated that these monsters may represent earlier stages of life, but never fully developed. Even though they lack any clear meanings, the Numb Bodies fit into the game's tone perfectly. Their childlike cries and awkward movements make them feel like something that shouldn't exist, something incomplete or abandoned. The Pendulum is one of the more visually disturbing in the game. First encountered in the Central Square shopping center, these monsters make their presence known with their sharp movements and ear-piercing screeches. It reappears throughout your journey, lurking in the Lakeside Amusement Park or the Order's Chapel. The Pendulum's appearance is horrific. It looks like two human torsos cut in half and fused together at the hips, each half facing in opposite directions. At the center of this monster are bladed legs that it uses to slice and lunge at you. Its torsos are bound, with arms tied and bandaged behind their backs. Blades extend from both of its heads as well. True to its name, the pendulum swings its body in a circular motion. Its name is tied directly to its method of attacks and movement. Like a pendulum swing, its rotations are rhythmic but deadly. While it often floats just above the ground, some pendulums walk on their bladed legs. As it moves, it makes a screeching, metallic sound that echoes throughout the dark areas you explore. Even in areas where visibility is low, the sound alone is enough to make players uncomfortable. The pendulum serves as a symbol that reflects the fractured relationship between Heather and Alessa. The monster's dual-headed mechanical design suggests duality and internal conflict, echoing the way Heather and Alessa represent two halves of the same soul. Alessa's tormented past and Heather's struggle with inherited trauma are strongly influenced in the pendulum's aggressive behavior. Its constant swinging motion might also symbolize the back-and-forth struggle between Heather's present identity and the dark legacy of Alessa that haunts her throughout the game. Whether it's floating through the air or scraping its bladed legs against the ground, the pendulum is a monster to keep you playing with the lights flicked on. The Split Worm is the first major boss Heather encounters, and pretty much sets the tone for what's to come. Found deep within the Central Square shopping center, the Split Worm, not to confuse it with the Split's Head, as seen in the first game, is a massive worm-like monster with a thick skin that acts like armor. When it splits open, it reveals a fleshy head without eyes or nose, just a gaping mouth filled with teeth that looks disturbingly human. Gooey strands connect its head to the outer shell, making its appearance even more detailed. This monster burrows in and out of large openings around the room, disappearing and reappearing. Its main attack is lunging forward to bite Heather with its huge jaws. It can also slam into the ground, causing tremors that can knock Heather off her feet, leaving her vulnerable. The most dangerous is its sudden lunge attack, which can be deadly if she doesn't dodge in time. Heather's weapons don't affect its tough outer skin. She has to wait until it opens up to attack, exposing its vulnerable head. But the Split Worm isn't just a boss battle. It symbolizes deeper fears and anxieties. Its act of splitting open can be seen as a representation of childbirth, tying into Heather's struggles with the destiny of the cult's plans they have for her. The protective shell might represent confinement or safety, while the emerging head reflects fears of something unwanted breaking free. Its shape and the way it moves through cavities could allude to invasive acts. The door leading to the Split Worm is marked with a moonstone and a poem about childbirth, reinforcing these suggestive themes. The moonstone is often associated with fertility, highlighting Heather's inner turmoil and her struggle for autonomy.
What? It's the shopping mall just like before. Am I back?
The insane cancer is one of the most disturbing, not because of how it attacks, but because of what it represents. You first encounter an insane cancer in the Hazel Street station shortly after picking up a shotgun in an abandoned train car on Platform 2. The creature is lying there, seemingly asleep, its massive fleshy body oozing pus from open sores. For a moment, it doesn't seem alive, just a pile of diseased bulbous flesh. But then it moves, its small, indistinct head tilting toward Heather, and it becomes clear that this thing isn't just alive, it's aware. Its sheer size makes it intimidating, but its ability to spring to life with surprising speed makes it even worse. The monster's heavy arms, tipped with claw-like hands, swing wildly when it attacks, and it's strong enough to throw its entire weight on top of you if you let it get too close. At first, it's tempting to try to avoid the insane cancer entirely. Its sluggish movements, the way it sways as if barely able to hold up its own weight, make it seem like you might be able to sneak around it, but its size often makes that impossible. The monster blocks paths with its massive hulking body, forcing Heather to fight it. Its resistance to damage makes these encounters feel grueling. It takes several well-placed shotgun blasts to knock it down, and even then, it may still rise again, regenerating while it rests. Killing it requires precision and persistence. The insane cancer's appearance isn't just random. Its name alone suggests its symbolic role: a cancer running wild. Its bloated, diseased body covered in sores feel like a living embodiment of unchecked growth, of something festering and out of control. The Book of Lost Memories ties its form to the corruption of Silent Hill itself, a physical representation of the rot spreading throughout the town. But on a deeper level, it's tied to Heather, and by extension, Alessa. Alessa's feelings of being a burden, a cancer that couldn't be stopped or removed, are mirrored in the insane cancer's grotesque form, and its refusal to die easily. Even in death, it lingers, threatening to rise again. Its mimicry of death, lying still, appearing lifeless, but secretly regenerating, connects to Alessa's existence. To the world, Alessa was dead after the fire had burned her, but in truth, she was kept alive, trapped in a hospital, unable to escape the pain of her own body or the god growing inside of her. The insane cancer represents this with its persistence, refusing to stay dead, as though it's as much of a prisoner of its own existence as it is a threat to Heather's. The insane cancer can be seen as a manifestation of Heather's growing awareness of the god developing inside of her, a living disease that can't be stopped. Its swollen form evokes the physical fears of pregnancy taken to their absolute extreme, bloated, uncontrollable, and consuming. It's not just a monster, it's a reflection of Heather's internal conflict, of the horrifying realization that her own body is no longer hers. Much like how the name suggests, the Slurper's appearance is strange and disturbing. They look like men wearing masks with their long tube-like snouts, which are lined with teeth and lips, giving them an insect-like or animalistic feel. They crawl on all fours, using their snouts to slurp up blood and flesh from the ground. Their movements are jerky but determined, and their aggressive behavior makes them a difficult threat. These monsters first appear after Heather enters the other world within Brookhaven Hospital. From the start, their presence is a lot to handle. They're fast, deceptive, and loud. They move with purpose, crawling or charging at Heather with club-like arms. What makes the Slurpers so dangerous is how they attack. They charge at Heather at high speeds, knocking her down and following it up with some stomps and bites. If they grab her leg, they hold on to it tight, biting repeatedly until she shakes them off. Their speed makes it almost impossible to run away. The monster's design and behavior may represent control, fear, and vulnerability. Their aggressive attacks, which often involve knocking Heather down and crawling on top of her, carry dark undertones. Given the game's focus on Heather's struggle with forced motherhood and the cult's plans for her, the Slurper's actions and appearance could symbolize fears of violation and loss of control. Its name and suction-like snout also ties to the ideas of extraction, possibly referencing medical procedures related to pregnancy and miscarriage. Another interpretation is that the Slurper represents Heather's anxieties about children and motherhood. At just 17 years old, Heather is already grappling with the cult's attempts to force her into a role she's unprepared for. The Slurper's crawling, almost childlike movements and its desperate way of clinging onto Heather might reflect those fears. Its combination of childlike traits with adult strength creates a disturbing juxtaposition, making it harder to pin down exactly what it represents. The Glutton is a manifestation of dread, a symbol of being trapped, powerless, and completely at the mercy of forces far beyond your control. But the name implies that this thing eats, devours anyone in its path, or overindulges in the likes of eating, and yet, when Heather comes across it in the hilltop center, it doesn't attack. It's simply just there, blocking the only exit with its decaying flesh inside a jagged, spiked cage. The thing inside is sickening, its flesh seeming to sag and rots as though it's more of a corpse than something alive. Its mouths, initially thought to be eyes, the two of them convulse and twitch. The radio buzzes with static, but this thing isn't a threat. It doesn't need to be. Its presence is more than enough to crush any hope of moving forward. This isn't a fight, and attacking it will get you nowhere. The Glutton doesn't seem to care about your existence, and yet you do. It is oppressive, and the sheer size of the thing, combined with the movements of its mouths, creates a feeling of complete helplessness. It's not here to hurt you, it's here to stop you, to hold you in place, to make you feel the weight of your own insignificance. To get past this thing, Heather has to piece together an old fairy tale. Tu fue ego eres. In other words, what you are, I was. What I am, you will be. This is likely referring to death, and the story speaks of a monster that blocks a village's exit, devouring anyone who tries to leave. Its hunger insatiable, its power absolute. Only a priestess resurrected through compassion can banish it. The parallels to Heather's own journey are undeniable. She is Alessa reborn, shaped by suffering and brought back by forces she cannot fully understand. The monster's design adds layers to this symbolism. The sharp spikes at the bottom of the cage suggest danger and death, but the fleshy shrouds hanging from the top are more fragile, more vulnerable, as though the glutton itself is a prisoner of the other world's will. The mouths on its chest and head, always moving, never satisfied, speaks to its role as a devourer, not of flesh but of freedom. And the metal ring around its head, resembling a twisted halo, ties it to Claudia's belief in the holiness of these monsters. To Claudia, the glutton isn't a barrier, it's a holy figure, a protector of God's plan, ensuring that Heather can't leave until she fulfills her purpose.
Did you do this?
You're late.
But why? Why?
Revenge for 17 years ago, for one thing. If not for him, our dream would have come true. And then he took you away from us.
I'll get you for this!
There is another reason. To fill your heart with hatred. It must be this way. One day you'll understand why.
No, I'll never understand!
You must try to remember me, and your true self as well. You will birth a god, and build an eternal paradise. He's the one who killed your father.
The Missionary is, in my opinion, the most infuriating boss, not just for its role in the story, but for what it symbolizes. Appearing on the rooftop of Heather's apartment, the Missionary is the direct cause of your father's death. The act of violence isn't random, it's calculated, ordered by Claudia Wolf to provoke Heather, forcing her deeper into her darkest emotions. This encounter begins shortly after Heather discovers her father's lifeless body, murdered in their apartment. The grief and rage consume Heather, and Claudia, standing just beyond reach, coldly admits that she sent the Missionary to kill Harry. Claudia believes this pain will awaken Heather's hatred, fueling the god growing within her. The Missionary is not like any other monsters. Its humanoid appearance makes it feel uncomfortably familiar. It wears what looks like a sack over its head with a noose tied around its neck, as though it's trapped between life and death. Its blood-stained clothes and long gloves gives the appearance of a surgical attire. The most disturbing detail is its face, partially visible beneath the sack. Its expression is one of constant pain. A mix of humanity and horror gives the Missionary a presence that's far more menacing than the mindless monsters Heather has faced up to this point. The Missionary fights with two long-bladed weapons, slashing at Heather with speed and precision. The name and appearance carries a deep symbolic meaning, tying into belief, control, and the forced role of motherhood. The name Missionary represents someone's sense on a religious mission, reflecting both its role as Claudia's hitman and her attempt to convert Heather to the Order's cause. The Missionary may also represent a deeper psychological struggle for Heather. In her eyes, it appears as a monster, but the truth is far more disturbing. It was once a human, likely a member of the Order, becoming a monster due to Claudia's influence. This idea of humanity corrupted by belief is Silent Hill, as many of its horrors stem not from the supernatural, but from the choices and actions of those consumed by the Order's teachings.
I just met some guy named Vincent.
Vincent?
He's a friend of yours, right?
I'm not sure.
He said when we get to Silent Hill to look for a guy named Leonard, and he gave me this map. What do you want to do?
We can't trust him, but we've got no other choice.
The nurses embody both Heather's fragmented memories and Alessa's deep inner torment. Heather first encounters the nurses shortly after entering Brookhaven Hospital. Their appearance is weirdly human, but something about them feels off. Their bodies hunched over, their breathing is heavy and strained. Their faces are smeared with strange red squares around their mouths, a detail that's ambiguous yet unnervingly specific. The design seems to hint at feeding, bleeding, or even something symbolic, perhaps a reflection of the inner torments Heather inherited from Alessa. The sound alone is enough to make them feel oppressive, and when they attack, it's with a ferocity that sets them apart with many other monsters in the game. Some carry iron pipes, lunging at Heather with surprising speed and strength, while others carry revolvers, making them even deadlier from a distance. The tight maze-like halls of Brookhaven Hospital make avoiding them difficult, and their ability to attack in numbers adds to the tension. The best strategy is to take them out one by one, prioritizing the ones with guns while keeping an eye on your surroundings to avoid being cornered. The nurse's design is rooted in both Heather's memories and the chaotic influence of the other world. Unlike the puppet nurses from the first Silent Hill or the bubblehead nurses from Silent Hill 2, these monsters have a human-like appearance, though they are far from ordinary. Their uniforms resemble those of real Brookhaven nurses. Their constant twitching, closed eyes, and red squares around their mouths make them feel distinctly otherworldly. These squares symbolize Alessa's inner torment, her rage, her pain, and the shrieking insanity of being trapped in her own suffering. The nurses, with their mouths and strange uniform behavior, reflect this madness. They may also echo Heather's fragmented memories of Lisa Garland, the kind but tragic nurse from the original game, whose image is still buried deep in Heather's subconscious. The connection to Lisa Garland is subtle but intentional. The nurses' more human-like design and their attire mirror Heather's subconscious memories of Lisa, blending the comforting familiarity of a nurse with the horrors of the other world. They lack the parasitic growth or exaggerated features of earlier nurse designs, emphasizing a more grounded but still deeply bizarre presence.
Hello?
Claudia?
No, I'm not.
Don't lie to me, Claudia. You're always trying to run from your responsibilities. Have you come to apologize? Or maybe you still don't realize how foolish you've been.
Leonard Wolf is one of the darkest and disturbing figures in the game, not just because of his appearance, but because of what he did. He was Claudia Wolf's father, a man who abused her under the disguise of faith. Leonard believed in the Order's teachings so much that he used violence to enforce them, hitting and screaming at Claudia whenever she stepped out of line. His actions shaped her into the die-hard follower that she became, but they also left her deeply scarred. Even though she hated him for what he did, his influence stayed with her, and his death still seemed to affect her. Heather's first encounter with Leonard begins in Brookhaven Hospital, where she searches for the Seal of Metatron, an artifact she hopes can stop Claudia's plans. Leonard calls her, initially sounding rational. He shares Heather's disdain for Claudia, calling her a fool, but his tone shifts when Heather speaks of killing Claudia. For all his cruelty, Leonard still feels something for his daughter, disapproving of Heather's harsh words. He offers to help Heather if she will free him from the hospital, directing her to a door that wasn't there before. The door leads Heather deeper into the other world, where she finds Leonard waiting in the flooded basement. At first, he speaks calmly, but as soon as he realizes Heather isn't a believer, his true form comes out, and he refuses to give her the Seal of Metatron, claiming it's his duty to protect it. As he rises from the water, his body is bloated and sickly, his face distorted with holes where a face should be. His arms are massive and shaped like blades. In the water, he moves with surprising speed, circling Heather and making it harder to track him. But when he's out of water, he's slower, still dangerous, swinging his arms with enough force to deal some serious damage. Leonard's appearance as a monster reflects what he was in life. His large, bladed arms seem to symbolize the violence he used against Claudia, while his bloated, distorted body feels like the weight of his own beliefs crushing him. There's also an eerie human quality to him. His voice remains calm during the fight, making it hard to separate the thing he's become from the man he was. After Leonard's death, Claudia's reaction is complicated. She's angry at Vincent for sending Heather to him, but there's also a hint of sadness. Despite everything, Leonard shaped her life, and his loss seems to stir something in her. His abuse created the person Claudia became, and his death doesn't erase the damage he's caused.
Leonard's not here anymore. I guess I should head back to the motel now. I hope Douglas is okay.
The memory of Alessa is a personal and intense moment in the game, forcing Heather to confront the darkest parts of herself. The fight takes place on the carousel in the Lakeside Amusement Park, the same location where, in the first game, Harry faced Sybil Bennett. That earlier fight was heartbreaking, with Harry forced to either kill or save a friend consumed by the other world's influence. Now, years later, his daughter faces herself, a battle not with a friend but with the pain and trauma left behind by Alessa. The figure is burned and damaged, representing Alessa's suffering during her torture years ago. Her clothes are darker, her movements are jerky, and everything about her feels wrong. She is not a separate person but an extension of Heather, a manifestation of Alessa's persistent pain and guilt. The fight is emotional. This thing attacks Heather with weapons she herself has used, starting with the knife and escalating to more dangerous weapons like the handgun, steel pipe, and submachine gun. The memory of Alessa mirrors Heather's own fighting style, making every phase of the battle feel personal. Each time she's defeated, she disappears in a pool of blood, only to reappear stronger. Each phase symbolizes the growing pressure on Heather to overcome not just the fight, but her own inner conflict. The burning figure in the center of the carousel is a clear symbol of Alessa's sacrifice, the event that defined her pain and set the events of both games into motion. After the memory of Alessa is defeated for the final time, she leaves a message written in blood on the floor of the carousel. Her words reveal her intentions. From the suffering and cruelty of birthing a god, she believed death was the only way to end this torment, the only way to escape the endless pain that Alessa endured. Heather, however, rejects this idea. After reading the message, she speaks directly to Alessa, acknowledging their shared pain, but refusing to give in to despair. The Scrapers are late-game monsters that bring with them a sinister echo of past trauma. Found in the hallways of the Order's chapel, they represent the pain Heather has endured, like losing her father. While they aren't as physically imposing or dangerous as the Missionary, their presence is symbolic, tied to Heather's journey and the cult's themes of pain, sacrifice, and control. The Scrapers look very similar to the Missionary in both appearance and in nature. Dressed in dirty brown robes with brown sacks covering their faces, their hands covered in bloody rubber gloves holding blades constantly scraped together, hence their name. Unlike the Missionary, Scrapers are smaller and insignificantly weaker. They block narrow hallways, forcing Heather to confront them head-on. Their attacks are quick. Despite their reduced strength compared to the Missionary, their ability to corner and overwhelm Heather makes them a serious obstacle, especially as their numbers increases the closer you get to the game's end. The Scrapers may represent members of the Order or manifestation of Claudia's vision of the cult. Their surgical appearance hints at something cold and clinical. Their name represents themes of forced control over Heather's body and the cult's obsession with her role as the mother of their god. The scraping sound of their blades, combined with their medical-like appearance, could symbolize procedures such as cruel methods used in pregnancy termination. The connection between the Scrapers and the Missionary deepens their impact. While the Missionary was directly responsible for Harry's death, the Scrapers seem to serve as a reminder of that trauma. This is especially clear after Heather leaves the otherworld version of her father's bedroom in the chapel, only to be confronted by these monsters. Their presence in that moment underscores Heather's pain, As you progress through the chapel, the number of scrapers increases, symbolizing the growing intensity of your struggle. Their constant scraping sound creates a suffocating atmosphere, forcing Heather to confront not only the physical danger, but also the emotional stresses in her life.
Is this a dream? It's gotta be. Not even a kid could believe in this.
Valtiel is a haunting figure, quietly following Heather throughout the game. His name combines valet, meaning attendant, with the angelic suffix L, marking him as the attendant of God in the cult's belief. Despite his creepy, almost demonic appearance, he holds a significant role within the Order's plan. Heather first encounters Valtiel in the shopping mall's depths. While descending in an elevator, she glimpses him behind a fan. He appears to be manipulating another monster, almost casually, as if to remind you of his control over the other world. This fleeting glimpse is unsettling, foreshadowing the many times Valtiel will silently observe and intervene in her journey. His head constantly twitches and vibrates, making his features hard to discern. His face is blank with crude stitches where a mouth should be. Dressed in what looks like to be a butcher's apron and gloves stained with something dark, he carries an aura of dark purpose. The seal of Metatron adorns both his shoulders, suggesting a deep connection to the cult's rituals. Throughout your journey, Valtiel appears at crucial moments. In Brookhaven Hospital, you see him turning valves, a reoccurring action that seems to trigger shifts into the other world. These valves might symbolize cycle of rebirth, aligning with his role in overseeing the resurrection of the cult's deity. He doesn't attack Heather or directly interfere with her actions, but is always nearby, observing. His focus seems less on Heather herself and more on the god that the cult believes is growing within her. If Heather dies during the game, there's a chance you'll see Valtiel dragging her lifeless body away, possibly intending to revive the deity inside her. This grim act underscores his true purpose, ensuring the birth of God at any cost. He's not a protector or a guide for Heather, but an enforcer of the cult's dark plans. Valtiel's constant presence ties into the themes of fate and loss of control. His silent appearance and manipulation of the environments symbolize the cult's grip on Heather's life, pushing her toward a destiny she doesn't want. He's often seen interacting with other things in disturbing ways, like dragging nurses away or appearing in vents, reinforcing the idea that he's pulling the strings from the shadows. In the game's final chapters, Valtiel plays a direct role in the final scene. He pulls Claudia into a pit leading to the deity's birth and later tends to the newborn god, covering its head with a red veil. These ritualistic actions highlight his role as an attendant in the cult's belief system. Unlike many monsters in Silent Hill, Valtiel doesn't seem to be a manifestation of personal guilt or trauma. Instead, he exists independently within the other world, serving the cult's deity directly. His design echoes other figures in the series, like Pyramid Head, but while Pyramid Head acts out of justice or punishment, Valtiel is more of an observer and facilitator, ensuring that what's to come proceeds as planned.
Can't be dead. I was gonna kill you. This is God?
The god serves as the final and most significant challenge for Heather. Aside from it being a seriously disturbing scene, this entity is the culmination of the cult's plan to once again resurrect their deity, but this time through Heather. Heather's journey toward God begins long before their actual encounter. The cult's plan to force Heather to birth this deity is rooted in her past as Alessa, whose torment and sacrifice laid the foundation for the Order's ambitions. Despite Heather's rebirth as a normal girl, the seed of God remained within her, waiting to be awakened. Claudia's actions throughout the game, manipulating Heather, murdering her father, and feeding her anger and despair, were meant to nourish this deity and bring it to life. This leads us to the final moments of the game, where Heather finally confronts Claudia in the chapel, choosing to reject this fate, ingesting a capsule of Agliofotis, the red liquid that can destroy demonic entities, forcing it out of her body. In a desperate move, Claudia consumes the deity herself.
Goddess!
Claudia!
To bring the birth she so desperately desired. The ground opens up and both are plunged into a dark abyss. At the bottom, Heather faces God. And this God very clearly resembles Alessa. The deity is malformed and empty, a reflection of its unnatural birth and the corruption that brought it into existence. The monster's veil, placed by Valtiel, seems to protect it, symbolizing the shroud of misguided faith that blinds its followers. Yet, beneath that veil lies nothing but a monster born from suffering and obsession. The aftermath leaves more questions than answers. Is God truly divine? Or is it just another monster born of Silent Hill's power and the cult's disturbing faith? The Order's mythology paints God as a bringer of paradise, a savior who would cleanse the world of suffering and sin, and yet this monster Heather fights is not even close to that. Its malformed body and destructive behavior suggests that it serves more as a reflection of humanity's flaws and fears than a symbol of salvation. This God that Claudia spent her entire life believing in is revealed to be nothing more than that, a monster born from suffering and hate. The monster's death symbolizes Heather breaking free from the cult's influence and the burdens of her past. This victory is bittersweet though, as she collapses, realizing the weights of her journey, and even more so, the loss of her father.
Is Is that the end? I guess it's time to roll the credits.
What a nightmare.
If you've made it this far, I honestly wanted to take this time to express a little bit of appreciation for allowing me to hopefully provide you entertainment with the videos that you've enjoyed. The amount of support that I've received in the past 2 months is immense, and it's only amazing because you made it possible. So thank you. Until next time, please sleep well.